We've told you this story before, but it's worth repeating. The plastic industry knowingly pushed recycling myths for decades. So I've been covering this for almost a decade, that when you recycle, they don't recycle it. They're sending all the stuff you think you're recycling, they're sending to a landfill. Most of it, not all of it, most of it. And when did that start happening? After China decided to stop taking our recyclables, because it isn't nobody can make money off it. It costs more to recycle stuff than it's worth. So here's I don't, by the way, I don't know where they got this from, the PBS, because everyone associates the word plastic with sincerity, don't they? Come on. That's why we will say it about someone that they're very plastic. It just means that they're durable and they can last 1,000 years. That's what I think. Anyway, here's PBS's report on what they call the plastic problem. You're being lied to about recycling, and that's what this is.
On average, the world produces 430 million metric tons of plastic every year. The United States alone produces tens of millions of tons of plastic waste annually. Yet, on average in the United States, only about 5 to 6% of plastic is recycled. Ali Rogan digs into a new report covering the plastic industry's tactics to push recycling and avoid regulation.
Wait, can't we make news anchors at MSNBC out of recycled plastic? I mean, since they recycle mainstream propaganda anyway. Come on. All right, here we go.
They made that guy at CNN out of recycled plastic.
That's what it looked like. Here we go. Here's the report.
A new report by the Center for Climate Integrity, an environmentalist group, says newly
Katie Helper's working for PBS. Isn't that amazing? Good for her.
Covered statements from oil and plastics executives underscore the industry's decades-long secret skepticism about the viability and efficacy of recycling. The authors of the report reviewed old investigations and new documents, including previously unknown assertions from industry executives. In 1994, one Exxon chemical executive put the industry's support for plastics recycling in blunt terms, saying, quote, "We are committed to the activities, but not committed to the results." Another representative from DuPont noted in 1992 that recycling goals were set knowing full well, quote, "they were unlikely to meet them." Michael Copley is a correspondent covering climate issues for NPR. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. Some of these quotes that are in this report are very blunt. They might be shocking to some, but you've been covering these issues for a long time. Were you surprised by anything that's in this new report?
Yeah, I think what's in the report echoes a lot of what we've been seeing from previous investigations, and that is that the plastics industry pushed recycling as a solution, even though industry officials have known for a long time that it wasn't going to be viable at scale, or that they had serious doubts about its ability to be viable at scale. What we've seen is that they really looked at recycling as a way to kind of fend off regulation and to keep selling more plastic. And so we've known about that. I think it's always striking when you see a report like this that unearths new statements, new quotes, and to see the way in which they really seem to view recycling as sort of, a public relations tool as opposed to an environmental tool that they sort of presented publicly.
Many of the most eyebrow-raising quotes from this report are 10, 20, even 30 years old. If they're so old, why should we be paying attention to them today?
So right now, what the industry is saying is the focus on these comments doesn't accurately reflect where the industry is today. And so what it's asking for is sort of the public to trust it, that it's working on this new technology that is going to solve the problem of plastic waste now. And I think that the historical record sort of undercuts public trust in the industry and raises questions about those assertions now. I think the other reason why this matters is it could potentially be legally problematic for the industry. And by that, I mean the oil and gas industry right now is facing dozens of lawsuits from states and localities based in part on statements it made about climate change and fossil fuel going back decades. We know that the state of California has opened an investigation into the role of oil and gas companies in the petrochemical industry in kind of the creation of the plastic waste crisis that we're facing. And the group that put out the report, the Center for Climate Integrity, was upfront saying that it was compiling this to serve as kind of the fact basis or the basis of evidence for potential legal action.
I want to read a response we got from a plastics trade group called America's Plastic Makers. Their president accused this report and the authors of it of citing, quote, outdated, decades-old technologies, and says it's mischaracterizing the current state of the industry, as you were just talking about. This group also says that plastic makers are looking to have all plastic packaging be, quote, reused, recycled, and recovered by 2040. So you just mentioned this, but where does plastics recycling technology stand right now? How advanced is that technology?
So the industry has presented advanced recycling, chemical recycling as a real solution. There is deep skepticism of it, and not just from sort of environmentalists who you'll talk to, but
right. And I should note here, Michael, that advanced recycling is actually a term of art that is used among the plastics industry to describe the current state of this recycling.
Yeah, that's right. And so as opposed to sort of traditional mechanical recycling, what they're doing now is turning plastics sort of back into liquids and gases to sort of reuse. The skepticism comes from questions about, has anything about the economics of recycling changed? If in the past it was cheaper to make new plastic, why is that not still the case, especially when you see low oil and gas prices? And the other piece of it is plastic degrades over time. And so what scientists say is that there are just limits to how many times you can reuse plastics. So there is deep skepticism.
What does your reporting say about this claim that all plastics will be recyclable by the year 2040.
Obviously, the industry has put out this promise. I think that its critics will say we've been hearing these promises or promises like it for decades now, and that there's nothing in the record to think that now is any different.
Is there a solution here that climate activists and environmental experts agree on that actually includes recycling? Or is there consensus among that side of the issue that stakeholders need to be looking at solutions beyond recycling? That recycling is not the be-all, end-all to avert the climate crisis that experts will point to and say we're in?
There's a recognition that plastic is so ingrained in modern life, and it plays important roles in medical devices and other things, that it's almost impossible to envision a world where we move completely beyond plastic. I think what people are talking about is reducing plastic production to a level that is more manageable with kind of recycling systems, getting rid of types of plastic that are especially hard to recycle or you can't recycle, being more transparent about what chemicals go into this stuff that, again, make recycling hard. But it really does come down to, when you talk to not just activists, but also businesses increasingly, that regulation is going to play a big role. And so that, there was a hearing in the Senate, and the head of SC Johnson, a big consumer goods company, said something to the effect of, we need government regulation. Businesses can't do this on their own. And I think, again, that gets back in large part to the economics of this. If companies don't have to deal with these costs, it's hard to imagine that they will, in sort of a sustained way, create systems to deal with this if they don't have to.
So what would plastic surgeons do without plastic? Give you actual tits? Anyway. So here's a little, around the world, 1 million plastic bottles are purchased every minute. And that's just Diddy trying to stay hydrated while sweating it out on his private plane right now. There's one more piece of information. Half of all plastics ever manufactured have been made in the last 20 years. Production increased exponentially from 2.3 million tons in 1950 to 448 million tons by 2015. You remember that scene in Mrs. Robinson? What was that with Dustin Hoffman? What was that?
Yeah.
Plastics.
The Graduate, right?
Yep,
Like, one word, plastics. The future. It's the future. The guy was right.
Yep.
The guy was right. Production of plastics is it's at 448 million tons. It's going to double by 2050. That's expected. Every year, about 8 million tons of plastic waste escapes into the oceans from coastal nations. 8 million tons. You know how much that is? That's the equivalent of setting 5 garbage bags full of trash on every foot of coastline around the world. Holy shit. That's a lot of plastics. So what he said there was that they use recycling as a PR tool, not an actual thing to do anything about the environment. I just want to keep, for me, I don't care as long as they keep it out of the ocean. I hate that that gets in the ocean, and then it poisons the fish, and we all eat the fish, and then we get plastic. Everybody has plastics in them.
Yep.
And
food. Yeah.
And there's a floating continent of plastic in the Pacific. It's Craplantis, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway. So we talked about this once before, I think, and you said it's a big deal. It's a big virtue signal in places like New York City, the recycling, right?
Oh yeah. No, they'll give a ticket if the landlords put out, because most people don't live in private homes, at least in Manhattan. So it's on the landlords to make sure that everything is sorted out, or you'll get a big fine for that. And yeah, it's all bullshit. One thing this didn't get into, or maybe it did in the complete article, there are different kinds of plastics. Like, it's not like you could just take a plastic and put them together. There are different plastics that can be recycled with other plastics, which makes it extremely complicated to try to fix it this way. Also, an element of this that's rarely discussed is, testosterone counts have been dropping since 1970, and it's cumulative. So where the parent starts, the kid is going to start that much lower, and just keeps going generation after generation. There was an article, I think it was in GQ, called Sperm Count Zero, because as the testosterone's dropping, so are sperm counts. And at the rate of decline, men would not be able to produce sperm by 2050. And endocrinologists believe the closest guess they have is it's the plastics, that the plastics are disrupting the endocrine system.
Wow.
And that's the reason for that. They're not positive, but that's their theory of what's caused it. So clearly having this artificial substance in everybody's blood and everybody's organs are going to have all kinds of impacts on human health. Now, that having been said, I don't know if you saw one of the guys from Trigonometry. I always forget his name. He did an Oxford Union debate about climate change. And whatever you think about climate change, this is something I think people of good faith can all agree on, perhaps. He argued, listen, you're never convincing people from countries that are economically disadvantaged, who haven't been able to take advantage of 150 years of the Industrial Revolution, who are just having their Industrial Revolution. If their child's life depends on continuing to pollute, you're not going to tell them they can't do this. The only way out is to invent our way out. That you are going to have to put all of this time and all of this energy and all of this brain power that you're getting coming out of places like Oxford. He argued, you, instead of figuring out how to try to recycle this, you need to invent your way out of this. Instead of trying to limit the emissions, you're going to have to try to figure out a way to make carbon capture financially viable. That is where you should be putting your energy. That is something that I agree with, because I think even if you believe, well, people should cut down the emissions. Well, if wishes were fishes, we'd all be casting nets. It's just not going to happen. So that's the only way that you could solve this problem. You're going to have to invent technologies that can solve it. I think of this with the plastics because some people, I believe, have been experimenting with plastic devouring microbes.
Yes.
That might be a way to deal with this. This shit where you put the plastic with the thing, with the glass, you're not solving it this way. It's just not going to work.
Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'll believe that people like John Kerry and Al Gore and Barack Obama and Greta Thunberg are serious about solving climate change as they see it being caused by carbon when they start advocating for the end of private jet travel and the closing of 1,000 military bases by the United States around the world, because the number one carbon emitter as an organization is the U.S. military. And they never bring it up. What they want to do is they want to shut down Dutch farms. They want you to eat bugs. They want you to get rid of your gas lawnmower. I mean, it's insane that there are solutions, and
even if we do, China is not going to.
And China's not going.
India is not going to. So what does that accomplish?
Nothing. Well, when Barack Obama goes to Africa and he tells everybody here can't have an air conditioner because it'll heat up the planet, and then he flies back to he has 3 mansions. How many air conditioners do you think he has in those 3 mansions? I'm going to say at least 50. I mean, he's got a 48.
No. They have servants with palm fronds, interns actually, interns,
and they're all he's buying beachfront property. You really think the oceans are rising because of climate change? Why is Barack Obama investing in a beachfront mansion?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Same.
Do as we say, not as we do.
That's right. So, I'm very suspicious of the whole climate change narrative now after living through COVID. And that narrative, after living through Russiagate, after living through Ukraine war, which is 100% bullshit, after living through Libya, Afghanistan for 20 years, Iraq, it's all bullshit. Building 7, 9/11, all bullshit. They blew that up. I don't believe anything they're saying. I don't believe anything they're saying. I remember Al Gore was predicting that we would lose the ice caps in the Arctic by 2014. That didn't happen.
Yeah, Schellenberger has been doing a lot of work on this that I keep meaning to take a look at. I think, and that's why I'm saying, because it's a very contentious thing. Climate change, it's happening, it's not happening. I think something we can all come together on is, okay, all of this limit consumption and recycle, it's bullshit. That is something we can all agree on and proceed from there, I think.
Yeah, I'll do a segment on it. I was showing Steph a video from a documentary about how they always say carbon, when carbon increases, temperature increases. But the ice core tells you the opposite, that carbon increase lags behind temperature increase, that it's always temperature increase first and then carbon. And the idea that carbon dioxide is poison is also bullshit. We need it to live. It makes plants grow. And that's with the increased carbon in the atmosphere, there's been a greening of the planet. People don't talk about that ever. You know how I know about it? I found a study done by NASA that talked about how much greener the planet has been in the last 20 years. Cool. You want to say something?
Well, yeah, we were also supposed to lose the coral reefs in Australia, and that doesn't seem to have happened. That's what we were being told. If you remember when we were kids, we were supposed to have an ice age.
Well, they were predicting. Yes, they were predicting an ice age when I was a kid, and that's not made up. They were doing that. You couldn't turn on the TV. That's before cable TV, but you couldn't turn on the TV without somebody talking about there's an ice age coming.
Yep, there was going to be a second ice age. Yep.
By the way, human beings lived through that ice age. The last ice age. There was human beings. The last ice age was 10,000 years ago, right?
Yep.
So human beings have been around for 200. Now they think 300,000 years. Hey, come see us do a live stand-up show. We're going to be in Stockholm, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, London, Oslo, Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, Cortland, New York, Oakmont, Pennsylvania, El Paso, Texas, San Antonio, Texas, Edmonton, Alberta, Vancouver, British Columbia, and Denver, Colorado. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets.